Alrighty. You hear me okay?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. All right, let's see. Let me get this repositioned here. And take this not quite so full screen. And this one I can just put aside.
How is
I'll
this
put
going to
this
work?
over here.
Am I going to need to have my Carlson up and running?
I would prefer that you do, because what I'd like to do is I'm going to show you some of the things that I'll do, and we'll get them set up, and then I want you to go through, at least for the practice and the understanding of what's going on. Because I see some of the things in this sample. It's nice to get this sample.
I just wish I could have gotten you one in the DWG.
Yeah, this is fine too, though. We can just use this to help us build. But there's a couple of nice little things that we'll talk about, like line styles and how those are set up, and the bar scales, your excuse me, your joiners, labels, and such like that. Although I don't see. I was checking. Yeah, you do up here in the top. I see this, the lot line between these two adjoiners, say between Conard family and Gorman. There's one there at the corner, and then one here at the top. Although that looks like they own both of those properties. That's one there, but then down below, I guess I'm seeing one in here. Maybe it was accidentally left off. But anyway, but things like those particular line styles, because I was reading the regs and they talked about wanting dotted lines, and I'm guessing. Oh, you can't see what I'm looking at. I'm just looking at this map, but when they're talking about dotted lines, I'm guessing they mean a small dash. So this is what they accept, and this is great to model from. So anyway, let me let's see here. So yeah, what I'd like to do is, let me get this into her, and then I would like to have you follow along as I do this stuff, but then I'm going to do mostly, I'll do most of this development as it comes up, but I want you to know how to do it so that you can understand what you have when you start to use it, and how to put these things together. So if you'll go ahead and get your Carlson up and going, what we're going to do is work on a template that's going to be our starting place. And once that is done, and again, I will email to you mine. You can keep yours separate if you'd like. But just in case there's something that you might either get wrong or might have missed a step or something on, then you'll always have the one to fall back on. So I will.
And I know that there are layers that I'm going to want to create that the county is
Yes.
interested in, like layers for my survey control layer for deeds.
Right. Yeah, you're going to want the layers for your own control, and it also will govern like what the lines look like when they're drawn on that layer. Like your setback layer will have the dash line, the property line layer will have the big heavy double dot line, and all of that. So that, and your joiners. Now your adjoiners looks like are the same level of black ink. They're not grayed out or anything, but they are, well, looks like they're, it looks like they are in, I'm trying to see if there was a difference between them and the main parcels. Looks like there's not, just based, just other than their position. So, okay. All right, so let's see here. So I'm going to get my Carlson going. And I'm going to go ahead and so I'm going to share my screen here. Let me get back to this. I'll turn the videos off so we can save a little bandwidth. And I'm going to share my screen. I say all participants. And now I'll share the screen. I'm going to share my desktop one. Okay. You should be able to see my screen here now. And so what I'm going to do is we're going to start Carlson. And we're going to just start from the ground zero and start building this thing up. And what we're going to do is we're going to place this in your drawing template location so that when you start one of these drawings, when it starts up, you'll be able to choose this as your starting place. Okay.
Okay, but I'm not supposed to be doing this at the same time you are.
Yeah. Just follow along with me. But like I said, and if it's something that is going by too fast or whatever, just let it go. And because I want you to understand the steps, but we'll build this, and then between now and next week, I'll work on some more, but I want you to see what's behind it as we get things going. So. Oh, thank you, Diane. Just brought me some coffee. Lovely. Now, so if you'll go ahead and start up Carlson, and we're going to go over here on their left-hand side and choose new drawing. And when this comes up, you see the same drawing wizard?
Yeah.
Okay, so once this is done and in place and you're up and running with it, you're going to choose this, and you would leave this first little selection that says use a template. And that would be where you would, and don't do this part yet, but I'm going to just show you here. If you go to next, that would be here where you would pull this down. You would choose Jefferson County, whatever, because we're going to put this so that it shows up in that list. Okay. But today we're going to create an entirely new drawing to start from scratch. All right. And then we'll say next one more time. And the new drawing wizard guide you step by step. That's fine. Click next to continue. All right, so we're going to want to use feet and inches. That's our US survey stuff instead of metric. Say next. And now we're going to make this decimal. And you notice these are the types of units that the CAD system supports.
Yeah.
Okay. And this architectural versus decimal or even engineering. Engineering is feet and decimal inches. But again, it's feet and inches. So decimal is unitless really, but we think of it in terms of feet. Architectural is actually a defined inch. And this has really screwed up everybody in the AutoCAD world, because that's why you have things that get inserted and they're 12 times too big or 12 times too little. And it's all because of that fact that when an architect wants to do something 36 units long, he's talking about 3 feet. Whereas when you and I talk about something 36 units long, it's usually 36 feet. So anyway, so we'll leave it at decimal. We'll say next, and we want our degrees, minutes, and seconds to be in their surveyor's units, which means they will be broken into quadrants, and it will be expressed as degrees, minutes, and seconds. Otherwise, it would be 360, but degrees, minutes, and seconds. We hit next again. We're going to use color dependent or style tables. Now, well, this is always a big question, because style tables are really a bit more flexible, but the vast majority of most everything else out there is color driven, built on color tables. And for whatever reason, you have to do a conversion of your drawings to switch from one to another. It's not just a matter of choosing at the time you're working with it. So I think I'm going to leave these in color dependent, the CTB files, just because if you've got some old legacy drawings that you're working with, we need to keep those in that same type of definition. And then, how do you want to create entities in your new drawing? So this is a setting, and I'll show you also when we're over in the drawing session where you set this as well. But because this is a wizard, it's setting things up for us. And so I'm going to say, anytime when I'm drawing a line, I want that line type to be either defined by the layer definition or by a block definition or just a continuous line. So we're going to make it by layer. I'm going to make sure my UCS icon is on. That tells me if I'm in a world coordinate system or whatever. And my grid being on or snap on, and that's not like grid coordinates. And snap on doesn't mean I'm using entity snaps. I will be using those, but that means snapping to this grid. And that would be like you would set up every 5 feet and then the cursor would jump to those locations. So we'll leave that off. Again, these are all settings that can be done on the fly as we're working. Now the entity color right now, I can't tell if it's black or by layer, but I want it to be by layer. So I'm going to choose select color. Well, I'm trying to. Does yours come up?
No.
Okay, looks like they got that one broken. And we'll set that here in a minute though. And then I'm just going to say finish. All right. So that's now going to place me here, and I'm going to create my drawing setup now and this is where it hands over to Carlson. Now, in the Carlson side, I think the reg said they had to be what, a 50-foot scale or bigger? No, 100.
50 feet.
Okay.
But
So,
that's not something they enforce strictly.
Sure, yeah, it's kind of based on, like, here's 100 scale, for instance, on this one.
Yeah.
And so So whatever one, I mean, let's just, you want to leave it starting at 50, we change that as we need.
Yeah, mine's on 40. Should I go ahead and change it to 50?
Yeah, I would go ahead and do that.
Okay, then symbol plot size is at 0.1.
Right, and that should be, according to your requirements, they are both symbol and text said minimum size was 1/10 of an inch. So we're going to set that up as to be this. And again, everything we're setting here can be changed after the fact or as we work. And I'm going to use probably State Plane 83, West Virginia North. It'd be there in Jefferson County. Okay.
Yep.
And with the next button, oh, missing a drawing name, of course, up here at the top where it says set. I'm going to say set, and I'm going to put this one for now where we're working on it in my working folder, which mine's going to be out on my network, which is, here we go, let's see, H.
Where should I put mine?
Just somewhere that you can always know where you can go back and get it. It doesn't matter at all, but I put it in a named folder. So I'm in the projects, miscellaneous, and Mike Shep under plat making. All right.
Call it what?
And I'm just showing where I'm putting mine happens to be in this Mike Shep folder under plat making. So I'm going to call it Jeff County template. Okay. Now, right now, you see where it says .dwg? We're going to leave that there.
Okay.
I'm going to say save. And now that's going to come back to this. I haven't saved it yet, but it's ready to go there. I'm going to say save. All right. Now, what we're going to do, though, is so that we can use it as a template when we start up a new job, we're going to do a save as, and we'll switch that to a template. Okay. So for now, and there's no difference between those two other than the letter difference in the extension and where it lives. So now I've got my drawing set. All of this stuff is set again. I'll say next. And this is now my data path. Just by default, it goes to where my drawing is. And then my coordinate file that gets set, it would, right now it's named the same as my Jefferson County template drawing. But once we change it into a template, then this will come up, stay blank, or we'll switch it. And we'll set our coordinate file to new, and we'll set our import points from as none. And we'll say next, and then that should dump us into our drawing. Okay?
Yep.
So now let's take a look at a couple of things. When we have nothing chosen and nothing defined over here in our model space, nothing has been created yet. Or even if there has been something created, if we don't have anything selected, when we look at our properties, and I've got, do you have your properties panel up?
Yeah.
Okay. So when we look at those properties, what we are going to set here is going to be the current property. So right now my color is by layer. That's what I wanted. Remember I told you I couldn't tell if it was that or whatever, but if I make it green, for instance, now my current color is green so that anything from this point on that I draw is going to be drawn in the color green. But that's not what I want. Excuse me. I'm going to stick with that by layer, and we're going to use that to control some visibility when it comes plot time. All right.
Okay.
So, so now let's take a look next at our layers. Do you have this, this layer toolbar, this object properties toolbar?
Yeah, I don't have it in the same place that you have it, but I have it.
That's fine. Well, I want to go to this button right to the left of that first pull down. And that's
Yeah.
going to, excuse me, that's going to bring up my, uh, it's called the Drawing Explorer, but when I chose it there for layers, it comes up and it's sitting on layers. Now I've also got all of these other different types of things that we're going to define, or we can also, and we haven't talked about doing this yet anywhere, but we can open, let's say we have a drawing somewhere else that we have things done really nicely the way we like, and we want some of those definitions in our drawing. Excuse me, well then all we have to do is open the other drawing while we have ours open, and we can drag from one into the other, and those definitions will go back and forth. Okay, so we'll be able to do that. Now if you see under layers, I have absolutely nothing defined.
Right.
Okay, so we're going to define a couple of layers that we know we're going to need, and again, for Jefferson County it doesn't really matter, so my best recommendation would be that that we you know, name something that you're going to be familiar with or can figure out. Now, with that said, there is a really good start on some of these layer names in some of those other Carlson templates. Okay, and I'm going to show you how this copying back and forth is going to shortcut us here a little bit with this. So I'm going to, for right now, I'm going to close this back off, but notice I've only got this one layer and it is defined as being, you know, white or black on white paper. So I'm going to close this again, and we're going to leave this just as it is. And we're going to go over here to our file menu and choose new one more time. And now we want to use a template drawing. And we're going to say next. And then the template that we want to use is there's several ones that come with the package. There's the Carlson National CAD Standard, one for civil, one for survey. There's just plain old Carlson, and there's a Carlson IFC, which I have no idea what they mean by that IFC. I know what IFC stands for, the International, well, I thought I used to know what it stood for. International something committee, anyway, National CAD Standard. And then there's a Carlson combined National CAD Standard Survey Civil. Then you see I've got some others I've set up here. Here's another National CAD Standard Civil Survey. But I think what we're going to look at is this Carlson National CAD Standards Survey as our standard to start with. And we'll take a look and see. It may be I've picked the wrong one. We'll start over again, but I think it's what I want. So we'll choose that one and choose Finish. And when this comes up now, just hit Exit. All I wanted to do is get the drawing up and open. Okay, so now you should see at the top of the screen these two tabs, the two different drawing tabs.
Yep.
And so when I'm in drawing 2, which is what my it came from, and it's no longer, it hasn't been saved yet. That's why it's called drawing 2, because I started from a template. So if I look over here now at my layers, I'm going to see, you see all these G dash, G dash, V dash, V dash.
Yeah.
Those are layer names that are based on the national CAD standards. And you see they have varying colors, so we can keep track of them visually on the screen. And they don't at this point have varying line types, but we'll get to those as we need them. Okay. But the biggest thing I wanted to do was to take these, or some of these, from this drawing, and you see that's this drawing 2 now. I've opened up over here on the side. You see the different things we can find that are in here.
Yeah.
I go back to layers, and now I can open up mine. And when I find something here, let's just take, and these G ones are, I forget what the National CAD standards, does that mean geologist or does that mean general? I think it's geologist. Let me see, V. No, I think they're general. All right, so let's just take all of these. I'm going to select that G and a note. I'll come down here to G site, and I'll get all of those.
You hold the shift key to do that?
That is correct.
Okay.
And then you can lift shift key up and just take your mouse and drag and drop on the same category over here, which was layers, under our drawing name. Okay. And so now when you click back and forth, you can see how we got those copied. Okay.
Yep.
So let's go back to drawing 2 and let's get all the rest of them. We'll say V attribute data. And we'll come all the way to the bottom and shift click V water UNDR. Oh, that's interesting. Well, they got V water. Do they have a V?
Okay, I have had something else, a line type manager, come up and is asking me to load for okay.
Do you have a cancel?
Yes.
Do that. That's because you clicked in the column over, you clicked on the layer name over in the column with the line type. We'll get to that.
Okay, and then it ignored my holding the shift key down, so I'll have to go back and do that.
Yeah, go back and click that first one and click in the name. Make sure you don't click over in the line type column. And then go all the way to the bottom and shift click in that name.
Okay.
Now drag and drop up into your file name, layers. And there's one thing I've noticed already about this one that I'm not, we're going to have to do some modification. There is, like, here's a V. Oh, there's natural gas and gas. Okay. But I don't see electric. And
yeah, it's V easement electric.
well, that's for an electric easement. What about an electric line? Okay, or so, and I noticed down here they've got V water, and they got V water, V in gas, and all that. But typically, what you would normally see in today's practice for these national CAD standard type layer naming conventions is a V-util, UTIL, and then you would see dash CATV or dash WATER or WATR or dash GAS.
There's a V power.
Yeah, see, that's what they're doing is they had at this point when they defined these
V power overhead line. Yeah.
So what we normally do is we have a higher level of hierarchy called the UTIL, and then these kind of things would become part of that. So here you got power, you've got gas, you've got, and they've left out electric for whatever reason, unless it's in there anywhere. Well, you said power, yeah, that's it. And there should be, see, there's now storm and sanitary are usually, or SSWR and STRN, those are typically at their highest level because the sewer utilities are typically kept separate from these others. But in any case, it doesn't matter as long as we are consistent as we do our work, okay? So we now have those defined. Let's see if there's anything else in this that we might want to copy while we're here. We got a few line types. Here are these. Looks like we've got, and they're not, first of all, things like fence line, square, guardrail, post on the left, post on the right, stockade fence, etc. But if you see over here in this appearance, they're not really, I don't think they're defined correctly for us. So instead of using those, I think we'll define our own. We'll load our own. There are no text styles. There are no views other than the predefined ones. But let's look at
style under mine. Aerial.
Right. Oh yeah, this thing called standard. Okay, and we have also a standard, but it's got a different font name. So we're going to fix all that. But we've only got the one style in each. But if I had a whole bunch of them defined here, I might be tempted to copy them over, but we're going to work on ours in a minute. But I do want to look under blocks, and usually if there's another drawing that we've opened that has a bunch of defined blocks, that's where we're going to get a lot of information. Nothing here, no dimension styles other than the one standard. So I think we've got just about all we're going to be able to get from that drawing. So I'm going to close this Drawing Explorer, and I'm going to also close this Drawing 2 that we used from that template and say, no, I don't want to save those changes. Now, what I will do here is, let me see what I have. Under this one. Types. See, there's a few more line styles. Text styles, I meant to say, line types. Okay, I've got a few other big massive drawing files that particular one is not a good example. Let's try one more time here. It would be maybe this one. But I've got some that are really elaborate that I've got some from. So here's, it's an actual bit of a mess of a drawing, but it might have some resources. So if I see all these different layers, line types, yeah, look at all the number of line types they've got here. Sewer force main, you know, all the way down through the standard ones that IntelliCAD has. Text styles, a lot of different text styles. So again, these are things that you might want to, you know, bring across. But the biggest one I want to look at is this blocks. Wow, that's really loud. Sorry. Is this blocks, and these are things that are available to us to be placed in our drawing anytime, anywhere we need from any of these blocks. Now, we've got access to things from the Carlson symbols, but these are actual blocks, and they could be things like your company logo. They could be like right up here, for instance, is a turning radius a template. I can see that for tractor trailer turns. You know, so there's there's a lot of different things you can get out of those. All right, so I think we'll I just wanted to show you that as a potential. If we have a drawing that you've got something that you like in it that we want to use, we're going to use that mechanism to bring it into this template. Okay, so right now we've got the layers. Let's go up and save, just to periodically take a bookmark, place a bookmark. And now let's go define a couple more things. So I want to load some line types, some line styles. There's a couple of ways you can do that. Is we could just simply type the command line styles, but I'm going to go back to my drawing explorer, just where you were before, and I'm going to click on line types, and looks like I've got these $0, barbed wire one. I don't know if you have those or not in yours.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. Don't know exactly. Those came from when we had one of those other drawings open, apparently. Let's select all of those that have the $0 in front of them, and we'll delete those. Let me see something here. It has this. Oh, never mind. I see. Okay. No, let's don't delete it. It says layer V serve fence BWIR. So barbed wire fence has that as its layer. Actually, yeah. So let's not delete these for the moment, but I'm going to redefine some of these, and I'll show you where that gets done. The reason these came in is because when we brought the layers over, those layers were defined. See, here's my layers. So if I go down to V-serve fence barbed wire, see, it had under this line type column, it had a line type defined. Same for chain link. Okay. This is, I don't know who built this national CAD standard. It's probably one of the programmers at Carlson, but it's sort of inconsistent because they've got a layer called V-SURV, which means survey, but the V dash means survey. So these are, you know, it should say V dash fence, V dash what have you. But let's live with these for the moment. We can change them if we need to later, or you may decide that, you know, let's just name them something that makes better sense. But okay, so what I want to do is when I come down here, I want to take the ones that are defined with those old definitions, and because they come in with this $0 thing in front of them, that tells me it came in from outside. And excuse me, and the line style itself will probably not, you know, the definition itself probably won't show up, but I know what the name of it is, and I know where I can go and get that. So we're going to do that. So I'm going to scroll all the way up to the top, and I'm going to scroll down until I find the first thing that is not continuous, and that would be right here. The road, CNTR, center line of the road. Okay. Now, if I click that choice in that column, line type, That's where you got this one before.
Yeah.
And these are the ones that are loaded. It is referring to this one, which would work, but I'm going to just hit the load button. And I'm going to let this load from this file. And again, I could take this, and I have other files that I've used from other projects, other companies I work with. We might have had a company line type style, and that's all this is an elk or an ICAD.lin. I would normally see an ACAD.lin. It's a line type definition file. And you can browse to and point to a different one. But this is the one I want, the default one. And notice, when I open this thing up, this has a whole blue million of these defined line types all the way down through all of these, okay? So those are the ones that I'm going to want to do. Now, all of these numbered ones up here, long dash, double dotted line, and different sizes, you know, they're very precisely defined. But I'm going to, and I could come down here and just find center, right? To choose that. But if you remember, when I clicked that, there was a thing that said load, that load button. And so now it's going to let me load one or more line types into my choices. So I'm just going to actually go all the way up here to the top, click on the first one, grab the little bar on the right, drag it to the bottom, shift click all the way to the bottom, make sure they're all highlighted, and say OK. And when that happens, now my selector has all of these different ones in it. So now I'm back to where I started, picking on that $0 center. And instead of using that one, I'm going to come up here and find.
So I hit OK after I do that loading thing?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, and then what? Okay. Then
so now, yeah, so now back to this. So now instead of coming up here and keeping that $0 center, which with this one up here at the top, and it would be okay to have left it, but I just want to get rid of those $0 things. I'll scroll down to the bottom and choose center. And I'll say okay. I'm going to do the same thing for all of these. So here's my V-site fence wood. So it was using what they called us.
I'm lost here.
Okay.
You clicked on center.
Yep.
Which center? There's a whole bunch of them.
Well, the one that just says plain center. There's center, center 2, 4, and 8. You just want center.
I got a center. And then just say OK for that.
Correct.
Okay.
Okay. So let's scroll down and find the next one, which is V-site fence wood. And click on that one where it says $0 stackade 2, which they probably meant stockade. So I'm going to scroll this down and see if I have one of those defined. I don't see that I do. This is a fence line square, fence line circle. All right, we do have this. It's a stockade fence. I have no idea what that's supposed to look like. There's a fence symbol. We'll do that later, I guess. Let's see. It's called a wooden fence, which I would normally just make that a fence like an X.
Yeah, like a barbed wire fence. I'm surprised they don't have a barbed wire fence.
Yeah. Well, I'll use that as a fence line with circles, or let's use fence line square. We'll call that one for a stockade. There is a barbed wire fence somewhere, but it's not called bee wire or barbed wire. We may have to create that one. We'll come back to that when we need to. All right, so we'll say that one as a fence line square. We'll say okay. And I'll scroll this back down. Now here's another little trick. If you've got a whole bunch of stuff and you're trying to find certain things, instead of looking at your whole list all the time to try to find the next one that's different, if you click, you see these headings up here? If you click on any one of those, it's going to sort accordingly. So if I click on line type, and then I go up to the top, there's that one that's different, and then, oops, and then continue. So those are all the same. And now when I get down at the end of all the continuous, you're going to see there's the other ones that are different. Let's see. So I had that one, fence line 2, and then it started center, and then tree line 1, chain link 1, and barbed wire 1. So I'm going to click on that tree line 1, and let's come down here and find now we don't have a tree line. All right, I'll probably have to work on your line types for you here, during the off. We don't want to take up too much time here. All right, so we'll leave that one. We'll leave that one as it is. My chain link, I'm going to click that and choose that fence width around the fence line.
Fence line circle?
Yeah, that one's here. And then barbed wire, let's just leave as that one for now, because I didn't notice that fence line being defined. But we'll come back and fix that. And there's a way that you can make your own line types. It's a little complicated, so I don't want to try to beat that into your head. That's not something you need to worry about. You need to have a line type available and draw with it. So I'll work on your line types in there in the off season, as it were, in between sessions here. But that's how you would come through and define this. And now I'm going to come back and click on that layer name column at the top so that it sorts alphabetically. But you can do that by any one of these. Now, one thing too.
Type or the layer name?
Layer name, just however I want them at any given time. If I want them all sorted by color, there they are. If I want to, I'll just keep them by layer name. And if you click it a second time, it reverses the sort order. Now I'm going from Z to A instead of A to Z. And then click it, it just toggles. Okay. Now, another nice thing about this is, or another something to understand, right now, because I'm in model space, I have things like the layer name, the color, the line type, whether it's on or off, locked or unlocked, frozen or thawed, a defined line weight, a transparency level, a print style, none of which is active because we're using color tables and not style tables, and then whether or not we plot that layer. And notice here's one called GNO NPLT. That stands for General Annotation No Plot. So generally where you could write text that might be notes to a user, but they wouldn't get plotted. And you see over here where that little icon shows that it is not to be plotted. Okay, and then you could type in a description if you wanted. Now, notice that difference there, and that's all we've got. Okay, if I close this now, if I go over here to one of my layouts, Notice that this is a viewport. I select it, I look over here in my properties, and I see in this little thing right here that that is a viewport, which means it is a window into the model space. And if I double click inside of it, it thickens up. And now I am in the model. Now let's go back to that same tool up here in layer control. And now I've got, just like I had before, all of these colors, line types, on and off, that kind of stuff. But notice when I get over to the right, after that printing yes or no, I start getting things like current viewport, new viewports, viewport color, viewport line type, viewport line weight, transparency, okay? So what this is a means, and this is why we do our plotting nowadays from these what are called paper space tabs, is that I can, in this particular tab, I can be inside of that viewport, and I may decide I don't want to see my adjoiners. I would go down here and find my V dash prop, dash adjoiners, whatever. Well, say property lines. Let's say I in the main place, I've got my property lines, but in this viewport, I want my property lines, I don't want to see them. So I would come over here and go to VP, see here's freeze and thaw, they're on, but over here now I might say, I want them to be, frozen within this particular. We should just say current viewport. It ought to say frozen or thawed. And then that is, all right. But anyway, so that's whether or not I want them to show up here. And I can be in another viewport in another sheet, another paper space, and have it on, or have it a different color, or have it a different line style even. So I can control its visibility individually within these different viewports. So when you're in a viewport on one of these paper space tabs, then when you're inside of that viewport, you can redefine all of these layer, color, line types, whether they're on or off, frozen or thawed. And that only has effect within that viewport. Other places in the drawing, it doesn't have that same effect.
Let me ask you a quick question.
Yeah.
This is kind of an aside, but I found the other day on YouTube a video explaining the difference between model space and paper space. It's about an hour long. Should I watch that?
You know what? I'm going to suggest maybe you save your time unless you just have an extra hour. Because I'm guessing the one you saw is probably done by Jennifer DeBona from That CAD Girl. And
I don't remember who did it.
Yeah. Well, I will tell you about Jennifer. And I like Jennifer. She's a fine person. I know her fairly well. She's out of North Carolina, but she sometimes, and she's not wrong in what she presents, but she doesn't really explain things necessarily properly, and it won't have much effect for you, but like when she teaches her clients how to do surface modeling, she teaches them just barely enough to be dangerous with it, and it can really be some serious liability. So with that in mind, I mean, you're not going to get wrong information, but I'm just going to say it may be something you might not want to burden yourself with, because I think I can show it to you as long as you're going through it as we're looking at it.
Okay.
so that you understand how these things work. And we'll talk about those in a little bit too. But it's just that viewports give us a way to control how things appear, or even whether they do appear, in that particular context. So once I'm inside a viewport, notice my crosshairs are active, and I go outside the edges of them, they just disappear and becomes a mouse pointer. It's because I'm in the viewport. So once I'm in that world, that's as if it's an entirely different CAD file, and it follows its own rules. Okay. So if I click outside of it, that quits being black and highlighted, and now I'm actually out here on the paper. So now all of those viewport things don't apply, because I'm not inside that viewport. I'd see, in fact, as they give me a chance to, I guess I can still turn it off because I've got the one, but okay. So, so that's what we're going to use to control a couple of things. Like every sheet of your drawing set, you might not have to have your setback lines shown, for instance. So you would go to whatever 3rd, 4th, 5th, 12th, whatever these layout tabs you've got. And if you didn't want to see your setback lines on that viewport, you would freeze them in that viewport. Or if you wanted everything to be a real light gray instead of a heavy black, you could change that accordingly. Okay. So, and we'll work on refining a bunch of those things at a later spot. So that's how that works, what we're going to use to start setting them up. And I'm going to go back to the model tab next. And just come back to model space, because this is where we're going to do most of our work when we do our geometry, like when we're drawing somebody's boundary and labeling their meets and bounds and that sort of thing. All of that other stuff, the platting, the notes, the title block stuff, that's going to go on these paper space tabs. And all the only, or I guess the difference in model space and paper space, the only thing you need to really just be aware of and keep in mind is that they are exactly what they name themselves. The model space is the model. That's the actual geometry. And the paper space is your paper. That's what your map is going to be. Okay. All right. So we looked at a couple of layers. We looked at a couple of line styles and some colors. All of those things may change. All right. So I may take a look at this layer list during the week and decide that it's a little bit too esoteric, and maybe we'll come up with something a little different. But because you're not held to that for Jefferson County anyway. All right, so but it's a good place to start, so we'll start with that. Now let's talk about a couple of other settings in a CAD system that come up and have some application, if you will, to what we're doing. And those are typically done by your system variables. And they govern things like how line styles are generated, how round your circles look, that sort of thing. And the ones that I have found, or there's some several, but the two main ones that I found for appearance's sake are what is a couple of system variables, one called P-line gen, or the property, or I'm sorry, polyline generation toggle setting. And then there's another one called the view resolution, okay? And these are things that stay with the drawing. They're not global. They're not set them once for IntelliCAD, they're set for everybody. It is set per each drawing. That's why I like to set these up front in my template, and then any drawing made with that template will have those settings. And here's what they amount to. And let me show you what we're going to be talking about. Here's your sample plat that you sent me. In fact, let me get there. I'm going to come in here now. Here's how this would take effect. And this is going to be sort of subtle on this setback line, but you see that dashed line and then that dashed line. There's a couple of things I notice here. One is the dashes here are shorter than the dashes here.
Yep.
I don't know that they're supposed to be.
No, they aren't.
And they wouldn't be when we do this. But if we make this as, let's just assume that it's all the same dash length. So it's all one line style. What this tells me right here is that you've got one line drawn with one line type or line type scale, and you've got another line over here drawn, but it's at a slightly different scale. But if this is all a polyline, then it's all going to be the same line style. Now, a line style in this particular case, being a dash and a gap and a dash and a gap, you know, that's called a pattern, and it has a certain pattern that's defined until that pattern needs to repeat itself. So in this case, it's going to probably start right here where that dash starts. It's going to go a certain distance, being, you know, with the quote pen down, and then it's going to do a quote pen up and go a certain distance, and then it's going to start all over again. Okay, so if I'm drawing this line, I come to this vertex and turn the corner, go to that vertex. If I should happen to have that line go to that corner and turn the corner and go, and if that corner falls in this gap, then you're not going to really see that corner being defined. Okay, so in that case, same thing here is a little, you know, more prominently. So if that corner should happen to have fallen, say in that gap, you would see a line coming down to it and then a line going away from it. Not that critical in the terms of setbacks, but sometimes you just want things to, you know, make sure your corners are showing every time it takes a turn, you know, whatever line type it may be. Maybe it's, you know, railroad, tree line, whatever. So that's governed by what's called your line type or your polyline type generation. And let's go back here for a minute and let's choose a particular line style to use. And I'll show you an example. So I'll come here to my properties where it says line type. And I'm going to pick that down, and I'm just going to scroll this down past all these numbers. And I'm going to find one just called, let's just find this one called contour. Okay. And if I now draw a polyline, I'm going to come over to my draw menu and choose 2D polyline. And I'm going to come down here to the bottom, and I'm going to make sure that I uncheck this.
You want me to do this too?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
And then where it says line type, I'm going to pull that down, and I'm going to find that one called contour, which is going to be I have no idea. Should be in.
I don't have it.
Yeah, cancel that for a second.
There are a whole bunch of different line types there that
right.
we didn't.
Yeah, and Yeah, I know, and that's part of that Carlson stuff. Put that aside for the moment, Mike. Let's go over here to the properties where you switched it to contour, and
Yeah.
instead of using their command to draw the polyline, let's just type PLINE as a command. That means it's going to draw with that current line style. So if I pick a point and then pick there we go. Let's try something here a minute. Everybody zoom center. All right, now if I, yeah, okay. All right, do this. Go to, press escape, make sure there's no commands running. Go down to the command line.
What I've drawn.
No, that's fine. You can leave it there if you want, but just go to the command line and type Z enter, which is zoom.
Okay.
And then type C for center, hit enter. And it's going to ask you for the center of your view. So just type 5,000, comma, 5,000. Hit enter. And then it's going to want to know a zoom factor or a view height. Just type 500. Okay.
Okay.
So now type PLINE for polyline.
Now my line type isn't the same as yours.
Which one do you have set in your properties?
I have contour, but it's a solid line.
Okay. That could be why. If you press escape.
Okay.
Type LT scale.
LT scale.
Yes, LT as in line type scale. One word.
Okay.
Hit enter. What does it tell you it is?
Want to enter new value for what? Line type scale.
Yeah, type 0.5. Yeah, type. Yeah, type 0.5.
Okay.
Now draw your line type. Or go back and type P line.
Oh yeah, I did change it. Change the first
Okay.
one.
Yes, yes, it would have. Okay. Now we'll get into some of those here in a little bit, and but I don't want to burden you with it too much. But so right now, if you notice when I did that command, you see how I started here, I went to here. So you see how much longer, if I measure the ink going around this corner, you see how much longer, how much more ink there is there than there is in each one of these given things back here.
Yeah. Now my dashes are a lot shorter than yours.
Well, that could be just the difference in well, you say the difference in zoom level. It should be the same. They should look the same. I don't know why they're not. And it does say contour over here, not contour 2.
Right.
Okay.
Well, it depends on how close I zoom into it. If I zoom into it,
Oh, okay. Yeah.
so maybe they're the same.
Yeah, then they should be. All right, now. So I've done another one over here, this one. In fact, I'll change its color. Just so you can see it as something different. So you see how, and this one is actually a slightly different line style. I made that one contour 2 instead. It doesn't matter. The point is going to be the same. So you see how when I go up at this corner, how, you know, how lengthy this is, but yet over here coming down, it's short, right?
Yeah.
Same thing, short, and goes out long, because it's not falling exactly in between where one of those things should start. But if I do this, now watch as I start to make this. You see where the dashes are now?
Yeah.
And if I get slightly there, it starts itself over. You see, every time it starts over at that corner. Okay, but it's always going to have something at that corner. Okay, that's because my P-line gen setting, my polyline type generation, my line type generation rather, is set to automatically restart the line pattern definition when it hits a vertex. That's what means if I draw a rectangle, that's what is going to guarantee that I have solid corners. Now, if I type P line GEN, that's my line type generation. Right now it's off, and if I type on, and then go back and do this same type of thing, I'm going to just draw a polyline. I'm going to go here, here, and say here. Now watch. Yeah, so you see how I'm getting gaps that are sometimes I can define the point. Sometimes, well, in those cases, here's possibly that point is like right up above there. I don't know where it is.
Yeah.
And right there is a prime example of where I missed seeing the corner. Okay.
Right.
Now, there's an advantage to having it one way or the other. I'm going to take this guy and I'm just going to copy him so it's the exact same thing that you see. And we're going to talk about that in just a minute as to the advantages of having it versus not having it. So here's one. This one was drawn when it was set on so that it always repeated it every time it hit a vertex. I made a copy of it, the same thing here. I'm going to select the copy one. And over here, my properties down at the bottom, you see there's a thing that says line type generation, yes or no. So I can change it after the fact. So I'm going to make that one yes. And you see the difference right here? See that corner compared to that corner? Okay. Same thing over here. So that's really not, and that's where I was talking about earlier with this example map, is if, you know, it could have been done like that. All right. So you have to be sort of careful when you draw these things. But for the most part, I like to have mine set to not do this.
Just as an aside, the guy who did that drafting got fired about a week after that drawing was
Yeah.
complete.
Well,
I
the
didn't, I
drawing,
didn't do it, but somebody did.
right. No, I figured that, but not that he would have gotten fired, but that it was done by somebody else. And the drawing is fine. In fact, those corners, looked to be fine. They met at the corners. But just some of the finesse of what we're going to do. So, so I want a condition like this one, and I don't want a condition like this one for things like that, for those setbacks, for instance,
Yep.
or for drawn, rectangular type boundaries. But what happens if, now notice I'm using a contour line there. So I've got a contour map that, let's just go back to the same one that you had. If I were doing I'm drawing my polylines, or I'm drawing my my contours, and they're going okay, except when I get into something that's really tight. Oh, wait a minute. Is off. So so what happens is you wind up with something that looks like this. So as long as my vertices are far enough apart, like from here up to here, up to here, the pattern gets a chance to, as it restarts itself, it gets a chance to express the gap. But when I get in here in this part where the vertices are real close together, it keeps starting itself over again before it ever gets a chance to draw the first gap. And so I get these weird looking contour lines. That's supposed to be a contour line.
Right.
Same thing would happen with, say, a streamline, the long line and the dot, 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 and the line, the dot, dot, dot. And as it goes around through those stream meanders, it's just going to be a solid line. You're not going to tell that it's a stream. Right. So those two examples are cases where you want your P-line gen setting, your polyline line type generation, to be on. You want it to, when that is set to be on, which I'll turn it back to being on. So when it's set to be on is you're telling it to, let's see if I can do this. Okay. Yes, that's correct. So we want it, that? Yes, so we want it to be on the P-line generation. I think yeah. So what that means is when you have that setting to be on, is that the polyline itself is going to continue the pattern through the vertices instead of restarting the pattern at every vertex. So it generates that for the entire polyline. So, and that's something that sticks with the drawing. It's not something that's system-wide that you can change and leave it forever for everything. So that's why I like to have that variable set to be on. So let's do that now. We're going to type PLINEGEN and type enter. And yours will probably come up and say off, or if not, maybe you've done it before. Just type on and hit enter. Now, notice when I do that, it does not go back and fix things that were drawn with one setting. Here's this polyline up here, and it's still goofy, even though I changed that variable. Mm-hmm. So what you have to do is select the things that you want to change And in the case of polylines, now you won't see this with lines. You only see this with polylines. Lines are always going to restart at every vertex because they're not connected together. They're each individual pieces. So I'm going to select the one or ones, in which case I'll just take everything. They're all polylines. I'll scroll down here to the bottom where it says line type generation, and I'm going to turn that to say yes. Okay, so now the pattern flows through. Excuse me. And in the case here that, yeah, I missed a corner, but my pattern is consistent. Okay. Here I missed a corner, so maybe on this one and say this one, I'm going to come over here and turn that one off for line type generation. So now it forces things through the corners. Same thing I would do here.
But close should be yes.
No, not necessarily. For these, perhaps. But if you say closed for this, watch what happens. See, you put the closing leg from the starting point to the ending point.
Yeah.
And you wouldn't necessarily want that. Okay. Same thing, particularly on contour lines, you certainly wouldn't want that unless they were closed, you know, because you don't want your map looking like that.
Right.
All right. So even though for the most part, for things like contour lines, property lines, maybe, maybe not. It depends if you draw them as individual sides or if you draw them as polylines, which I tend to do, as to whether or not you want the pattern to start over at every corner or you want to just flow it through. And sometimes it's a matter, you try one, you try the other, see which actually physically looks the best. Okay. But there's going to be those considerations. There's going to be some line type scale considerations. And here's something that I dislike very much about Carlson's drawing setup. When they step you through that drawing setup wizard, or even when you go to the drawing setup command under the settings menu, and you tell it that you want your line type scalar, this is how, like I want my line type scalar normally, what happens is that, you see right now it's at 0.01, but I normally want my line type scalar, remember, is my plotted inches. I want my line types like a water line or a gas line, that's the line and the gap and the letter W and the gap and the line and the gap and the letter W and the gap for a water line. I want that pattern to be about 1.25 inches long. That's what I'm saying with this right here. Mm-hmm. That means it's going to go and change and make my line type scale to be 62.5, which if you look at that, if I'm at a horizontal scale of 1 inch equals 50 feet, and I want my line type scalar to be every 1.25 inches, so it takes this as 1 inch, that's 50. It takes 1/4 of that, which is 12.5, and it adds it to that 50, so that's 62.5. Now, that only works when your different line styles are defined at a particular scale of a 1-to-1 scale. And that would work with all of these line types that you saw, the ones that Carlson has in its definitions, but it doesn't work with the line types that you saw over here when you looked at these. These are the CAD defined line styles, and these are the ones we usually use anyway. And the way you get those to work correctly is that you have a particular line type scale. And if I select this guy and I look up here at its properties, right in here, you see that line type scale. And normally, unless you change it to something else specifically, it's a 1. But my global line type scale, which is what we just saw in the settings, right now is set to 0.5. Usually we want that to be a 1. So if I type LT scale and then make it 1, did you notice, if you do the same thing, did you notice how your pattern changes to a different scale?
Yeah.
And that's why if you had it, if I'd set it back to now 62.5, see, they all look like solid lines.
Yeah.
And I go, oh my gosh, well, where do I, you know, and I would have to make this thing big enough. And I don't know that I'm going to be able to. There it is. See, I'd have to make it that big for that pattern to show up. And that's just gargantuan and it has no relationship to this whatsoever.
Yeah.
So all I can tell you is, and there's, I can't really give you a good rule of thumb to understand this stuff with any kind of clarity, because it's different between the two systems. It's different between the way Carlson handles them and different between the way the CAD system handles them. And it's unfortunate. Carlson's is working the way Carlson's has always worked from day one of AutoCAD. And there's a reason for that. And that was because AutoCAD didn't have the ability to do line types very well. And Carlson had to sort of take the lead in those early days. And so they still have that, and they still generate those things with Carlson line types. But we sort of have turned the tables now and are using the CAD type of line type definitions. And so all of those things change. So I'm just going to give you a couple of rules. We're going to set some things up here, and then we're going to leave things set to 1. And every time we start a new drawing, we're going to get in the habit of looking at the settings, drawing setup, and whatever this is changed to. In that case, it was a 62.5 before. If I want it to be a 1.25, then I'm going to actually come over here in this side of my screen instead and type 1, or I'm going to just type LT scale and set it to 1 so that now my patterns show up. Okay. Now, as you would imagine, there's 2 other variables that work with LT scale. And that's whether or not I'm in model space or if I'm in paper space. So I'm going to go over here to my layout tab, and I'm going to double click inside my layout. And then I'm going to double click the wheel, which is like doing a zoom extents. And then I'm going to pan that to where it's in the middle. I'm going to zoom this up to be a certain size. All right. So now let's say this is what I'm going to be platting or plotting, platting. So I'll double click outside of the viewport and I'm going to zoom in. And notice as I zoom in, you see the size of those dashes there?
Yeah.
They're kind of tiny, right? And if I type REA, which means regenerate all, then that will change them. So now if you look at this box over here, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 dashes across the bottom of it. If I look at my model space, 1, 2, 3, 4 dash across the bottom of it. So they're lined up, they're synchronized. And so these are the 2 items that there's the two other variables, system variables, that are going to control that. Now, if I zoom, if I'm going to double click back inside of this, I'm going to zoom in like really, really tight on this one. Now, I'll double click back out of it. So now, if I'm plotting this thing and I wanted that dash pattern to be 1/10 of an inch, well, maybe it was 1/10 of an inch before, but now that I've zoomed in real close, that 1/10 of an inch is now, 3 inches or whatever it is on my drawing sheet. Well, I may or may not want it to be like that. I may want it to always be 1/10 of an inch. Okay, so if I go over here, I still got those 4. I come here, I still got those 4. And I think if I regen, yeah, see, if I do a regen all, once I'm set to a particular scale, then it regenerates this at its zoomed in level so that now those dashes are the same relative length as they would be had I plotted from over here. Right? This is getting complicated, I know, I'm sorry. But but these two variables that govern this are set here. There's one called MS LT scale, which is the model space line type scale, and it's either on or off, and we want it to be on. And then there's the
miscellaneous.
Pardon?
Where is that under miscellaneous?
You just type the command at the command line, MS LT scale. Okay. And then you do a PS LT scale. And I want that, yes, we want both of those on. And we also want the global LT scale, just plain old LT scale. We want to make sure it's 1. And so what this means is that when we zoom in at a particular level, and once the drawing gets regenerated, that line type scale gets scaled accordingly to where it's always going to be the right size dashes. Okay. So now, without trying to burden your brain with all of that, I'm going to say, let's just leave those set the way they are. We want MSLT scale and PSLT scale both set to on, and we want LT scale to be 1. Now that LT scale, you're going to have to change every time you start a new drawing because the wizard from Carlson is going to reset it. Okay, so just get in the habit of, once you're done, type LT scale and set it to 1. Okay. All right. Now, let's talk a little bit about some of the other things that we need in our drawing to get things started. So, especially since you're a surveyor, you're going to be one of the likely candidates to use Carlson points. And right now, if you use Carlson points, you're going to have, in fact, let's just go up to the point menu. And let's choose a draw locate points. I don't care what symbol you've got, just hit the screen pick button and click a point. And for an elevation, let's just call it 100. For a description, just call it test. Okay. And that's going to come in looking like that, which is what I call that old ugly font. And why Carlson doesn't redefine it, I don't know, but still.
I
Now,
have my elevations turned off. I guess
that's okay. That's fine. That's on your points defaults. You probably have it set there. That's okay.
yes.
All right. I tend to use mine, but anyway, that's no big deal. But what I wanted to talk about is the text style of this item.
Yeah.
And that's not very pretty to make plats with. Now, a lot of surveyors will never use these to make plats. They'll always draw stuff, you know, symbols and separate text labels. But for whatever, and for just in case, you can redefine that. So let's go back to our drawing explorer, which is that button up by the layer pull down.
Okay.
And we'll switch
I'm lost here. Where was that?
the little button that's to the immediate left of this pull down window where you can choose the layers and colors.
Okay, one with the thing that brings up all the layers.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. That's your drawing explorer, or
Okay.
see there, call it IntelliCAD Explorer.
Yep.
Right in the stripe. So you're going to look for your text styles. Now you can also type the styles command if you want, but this is the central clearinghouse for all these different controls. So now, where we had one before called standard, we now have one called PTXT because we went through the act of creating this point. The Carlson command uses these points when it inserts a block that is a Carlson point. That block is defined with a text style called PTXT. We didn't have it in our drawing yet, so we didn't have the style yet. It gets inserted in our drawing. Now we have that style. So what I'm going to do is change that style, and I'm going to, this is the style name. I'm going to leave that part alone. But I'm going to come over here under the font name column, and I'm going to change the font that's being used. And I'm going to switch that one to, the one I like to use is Calibri Light. It doesn't have to be that one, but it can be whatever you like. You can even leave it the way it is if you like. But if we predefine this now and come into a brand new drawing in the future, well, the first point we put in there is going to have this text in it. I don't have to go back and change it anymore.
Right.
It's going to already be done. Okay. Now for standard, and I think I was noticing on your plat, looks like your standard, well, you got them both. See this text for your bearing. That's Arial. Your point, is that a point number? That 1012 there, 475. That's Times New Roman, looks like, or some type of a serifed font, like maybe Garamond or something. I don't know what exactly it is. And then down here, your curve table.
Is there an advantage for using different types for different things like that? I would think you want them all to be the same.
Not necessarily. There's some clarity. Like for instance, your joiners here, they're italic, right?
Yeah, okay.
So now you don't want to just a mishmash. You don't want everything to be jumbled and carrying on. You do need to be consistent. Like make all your bearings and distances Arial. Make all of your joiners italic, upper lowercase. Make your tables all Times New Roman. It looks like that's what these were. You know, so I wouldn't get too overly concerned. One thing I would try to do though is right here, I'm looking at an example of three different, these are all tables essentially, right?
Yeah.
This has a double border around it, and the lines aren't even the same distance apart on the top and bottom, the left and right, nor are they the same line thickness.
Right.
Okay, now that could have been lifted from a piece of paper or scanned, I don't know. But that and the title is out here centered at the top, separated off, not part of it. Down here in my revisions block, it's part of that same table, very definitely. Centered here, but I would strive for some consistency across those things, and we'll work on that a little bit. For instance, one of the things that let's see if I can find you one to show you what I'm talking about. If I go to projects, there we go. All right, so this is one of my ongoing nightmare jobs. But here I have, for instance, all of my tables throughout all of my sheets have a, this is Arial, italic, with a line under it. And then the note is like Leroy, if you will, or Roman simplex. See, there's the same thing with legend. So that's all meant to appear consistent. All of my my title block stuff is in can't get there we go. So my job titles are all the same. This table, let's see, let's go right here. Yeah, see, these are always the same height. They're all done in that Arial font, as is, all of this mapping, all of the symbols, the distance apart for the labels on the line types. So in that particular case, now here's a case where that consistency just sort of bites you in the tail, because if I had my underground electric symbols, I've got 6 duct banks through here, and in this particular job, I would normally just draw one line and put parentheses 6 banks, but we had to see each one of those 6. So I made only the 2 outside lines be that line, just so that, because these are all consistently next door to each other, those symbols just right over top of each other. So that didn't make me too happy. But the whole idea is that, you see, on the title block page, I've got that italic line, numbered text in the notes. And if I look at any given sheet, you're always going to see that italic. I said that earlier, that was Arial. It's not, that's Calibri, I believe. But it's the same through every sheet. This is that Roman simplex, but my title is here, it's italic, and there's an underscore across, the width of the table. So that's the kind of consistency that you're going to want. And the demolitions. Oh, and here's another idea about these tables. This is defining the alignments. So this table is the same as that table, that table, that table, that table, that table, and all of these things go together. They're understood to be tables with headings here, like structure, station, northing, and easting. So in that case, you know, they're a little heavier. These are smaller. All right. So if you compare that to, say, this one down here in this corner, you see there's a lot of differences here. See, this line bearing and distance could have been either a heavier text, or maybe you put it in a situation where it's got a back shaded line, so you can very quickly and easily make that distinction. Now, does this, what's shown, get the job done? Does it communicate the information? Absolutely it does. So there's nothing wrong with this. I'm just saying, just part of the art and science of map making is things like that, is to be, you know, have some consistency across the board. I do see some good consistency with things like all of your bearings and distances are all the same. Your adjoiners are all the same as the other adjoiners and all of that. So, you know, this is, in my opinion, a very nice looking plat. I'm really, it sound like I'm carping on it. I'm not. But it's just, you know, certain things, like you see these, I have 3 acreage tables right here. Well, 2 are the same, one's completely different. Now that's something that I would have taken the time to have resolved that. Okay. I would also either have centered them all or put the edges all lined up with the edges, you know, just visually appealing things that you can do. Okay. Are they necessary? Not always. Is what you have out here, is this incorrect? Absolutely not. It gets the job done, it gets the job approved, and you get paid for it. Maybe that's the key, but part of my philosophy, and this might be why I'm pushing, you know, getting close to my 60s, and I'm still don't know what I want to do when I grow up. But, you know, I keep chasing the ring here, Mike. I keep trying to, the more I can make it subconsciously pretty and subconsciously consistent. I want people to look at my plats and look at that and say, that's got to be good work, because it feels right. It, you know, they can't define it, but it's that certain something that they can look at and see that says it's good. Now, you know, because I learned early on, once we had a job into the Pittsburgh Water and Sewer Authority, and this was when I worked for a smallish firm that didn't have a lot of ability to use that software, and it wasn't me that had done the work. And we started going through the comments that the Water Authority were making on reviewing the drawings, and after 6 sheets, the guy just wrote on the page, "I give up. These people obviously do not know what they're doing. Have them redo the entire thing and resubmit." And the stuff wasn't wrong. It was just so poorly done that it was horrible. So I keep chasing that little ring about making things as possibly best they can be. And that's why, you know, when I see these 3 acreage tables, I would take the time necessary to fix that. Whereas other people get this thing out the door and get paid for it. And that's really the business perspective that I should have, and I don't. And it's
no, and those are all good, valid criticisms, and I agree with you. But the guy who did this was the CAD operator who was assigned to me, and and I frankly didn't notice some of the things that you're talking about. But every time I told him to do something, it might get done, but then something else would be changed that was different.
Yeah.
And it was just very frustrating.
Oh, I understand. And so these are the things that we're going to be working toward.
Yeah.
To make sure that we do. And are we going to miss the mark? Sure, absolutely. I still do every day. In fact, I found a set of drawings, 60 some drawings that went out in a hurry and I missed changing the revision block date on about a third of the sheets, and I thought I had done them all. I swore I did them all, and I found out I missed them, and well, oh well. You know, and I even had people back checking, but they weren't back checking that kind of stuff very carefully. So, but anyway, that's the idea. That's what we'll work on here. But again, this is still very, you know, a very good idea. It's a good sample because it shows me what needs to go on the things. It shows me how to, you know, the certain things that need to be on the plat. And here's another something that I would have probably have done here. And it depends, because you see how on this sheet north is straight up, all right? And that's their Western convention. But the property is skewed at an angle. I would probably have drawn this map such that the bottom property line down here is straight across the page.
Yeah.
And that would make my north arrow go sort of northwestish to this orientation. And there's ways of doing all that too that we can set up. Now, there may be another reason why this is not done that way, or
no, there isn't.
I see something, right?
The reason is that he didn't know how to do it, and I didn't either.
I got you. And I see something else that's a little odd. If this is truly north up, and you see the way that property sits, look at the vicinity map.
Yeah.
Assuming that's also north up, those two things should be at the same orientation, and they're not.
Yeah.
Now, but I'm going to show you how we can fix all that. And it doesn't matter, even if you have this one with north straight up and you have this one with north over at an angle. But what I want to do is to give you the tools to where you can, if you saw over here, now you don't necessarily have to do it as a photograph, but all this stuff is available. And, you know, so that loads right in here on my high school project area. So all of these tools are now available. That's a map that was, you know, from Bing aerials. My USGS quad sheets are available, and there's my north up that somehow got twisted when it got plotted. Oh well. You know, but this is actually drawn at scale in the real world, out at its proper location and coordinates. And this is just a viewport into a part of that model space that brings all this stuff in together. It's all scaled to 2000 scale. You know, that was just and I use this on every one of my projects. So all I need to be able to do is in Bing Maps, I need to be able to navigate to where my project is, get it centered, capture that, bring it in, and now I've got it from that point forward. So I used to use, pardon?
And you'll show me how to do that?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely, I will. And so this was, let's start to say, oh, I used to do all this back in the day before we had access to aerial mapping over every square inch of the globe. You know, I would do this with quad sheets. But the quad sheets, you know, you had to load them up and stick them off way over in Timbuktu and try to find your way around. And we can still do it, still use quad sheets, and some places require them. But in any case, what we'll make as part of our process of making a plat is we'll go through the steps to do this, and we'll create, you know, the layers that these go on. We'll have a little north arrow and all, you know, bar scales. We'll have those as defined blocks, so we're ready to put things in their proper place. Okay. Yeah. All right. So now let's see. All right. So there's our first item for text style. Back into this. I'm going to go to standard, and instead of that also being that goofy looking thing, I'm going to change that to, and it can be couple of things here. I'm going to use this like my Leroy text. And so I'm going to scroll till I find IC dash Roman S, Roman simplex. Now the AutoCAD,
IC dash simplex dash SHX.
not simplex, but Roman S dash. It's two above that. They're basically the same thing, but Roman simplex has a slightly different and richer character set than the plain simplex. Okay.
Okay.
Now, and that's all, and I'll leave it at that. So now when I draw something and it's set to use the standard style, it's going to look like my Leroy lettering and not that ugly looking text. So the reason I want to...
Did the text on the drawing change automatically?
Not for this.
Okay.
It did for the point because there's nothing on the drawing other than this point, and that used a style called PTXT. So when I changed that one to use Calibri Light, that's when this changed.
Okay.
Now, here's a real shame for you, this IC-Roman S. That it's called IC instead of just Roman S, which is what AutoCAD uses. Well, Autodesk, because the IntelliCAD community was selling a lot of software and stealing a lot of customers away from AutoCAD, because you could buy IntelliCAD for about, for less than a tenth the cost of buying AutoCAD. Well, Autodesk got mad and sued them for copyright infringement, and the only thing they could make stick was that Roman S or any of those shaped font names. So that's why you see a whole set of the very same ones that AutoCAD uses, except they have an IC prefix in front of them, okay? Meaning IntelliCAD, Roman S, IntelliCAD, Roman C, MSI Implex. So what happens is if you share this file with somebody who uses AutoCAD, they're not going to have a font called IC-Roman S. Or if they give you a file and their font is defined by, or their style is defined by a font called Roman S, you're not going to have that. But the systems are aware enough that when you load that file up, you may notice this thing down here get reported that says IntelliCAD could not find font file romanes.shx ... substituted IC-romanx.shx instead. So it will do a substitution for you, but you may have some cleanup to do when you share stuff back and forth with AutoCAD users. It's just a shame that, that's that whole argument of Trimble just made it so difficult to ever work with other stuff because they want to lock you into using their software and their hardware and exclusive to anybody else. So Carlson used to reverse engineer all their stuff, and they finally just gave up. It said every time we make a change, they change it so that it's broken. So, but anyway, that being said, I now have something for a style called standard that is defined with a font called Roman S, which looks like my Leroy type lettering. All right.
Just as an aside, I know a lot of companies that have moved away from Trimble for that very reason.
Oh yeah, yeah, and and it'd be one thing if the software were, if it was decent stuff that could interact with these other things that other people are using, but they're not. They're trying to make everybody, live in that Trimble bubble. I think it's going to prove to be their undoing. I don't know that they'll go out of business, but they're not going to have as many customers as they could have. And it's just, It's just one of those philosophical things with me that I can't stand proprietary nature of stuff. You know, to me, like I've worked with people on jobs that are like particularly architects and engineers and contractors. Well, everybody jealously guards their stuff. They don't want to, man, I don't know, I'm the engineer, you can't have that. Oh, if you're going to insist on me giving this stuff to the contractor, well, I'm going to dumb everything down and put everything on the same layer, make it all the same color, and take all the elevation out. And that, you know, the point is, every player in this whole process is working toward the same end, as that is to get the subdivision made or get the building built or whatever you're working on. And if you're going to play that game, you're just an obstacle. You know, if you're an engineer that built the surface and you, Mike Shep Surveying, comes to me and says, hey, I'd like to have your design surfaces and your alignments, your roadway alignments, so that I can go out and stake this stuff easier. Or the contractor comes to me and says, I'd like to load this on my bulldozer and do machine control. I personally would jump at that chance and say, absolutely, help yourself, here it is, and let me know if you have any question. Other engineers are, that's proprietary information, we're not giving that out. And so they're going to force the contractor or the surveyor that has to stake it out or whoever to go back and recreate what they've done and indicated on their paper drawings. And that introduces an opportunity for them to, you know, mistype something or to misinterpret something. And it's just a waste. And that's what I've spent my entire career trying to teach people against. And yet it's a no-win situation. It really is. But anyway, I don't want to take all of your I don't want to take all of your time beefing about the industry. So here's the examples of a couple things we had to set. We did those LT scales. We set the P-line gen. Now those are things that you can pretty much set and forget in this drawing template, with the exception of LT scale, your line type scale. After you go through Carlson's drawing wizard, you need to make sure you run LT scale as a command. Just type LT SCALE, hit enter, and set it to 1. Okay. Now that MS LT scale and PS LT scale, we've set it. We're going to save it in their drawing template, so we won't have to worry about that anymore. But we did want to have it so that it gets applied. All right, and then the other one that we're going to have to remember to do, we've got it set to the way we want it to normally flow through corners and keep our line types consistent without bunching up with a bunch of little solid chunks, except for cases where we might want it to restart and stop the pattern at corners, for instance, like on these cases. So you may have certain ones that you have to select individually and then go over and change their property to this line type generation. You would either turn it on or turn it off. And if you said no, then it flows through the corners. If you say yes, it doesn't. So anyway, those are the only two things there that we'll have to try to keep track of. And it's not the end of the world if we don't, because we'll remember it at some point through doing it enough times. All right. Now let's see. At this point, you can select everything that you've drawn and hit delete. Just escape it. You don't need to worry about it.
Okay, there's part of that drawing that's way off before we set the 5,000. Let me do a zoom.
Okay. Yeah, do another zoom. Yeah, set everything. You could even do this, Mike. You could type SEL, which means select, except it keeps trying to SELECT. How about you could type that, and then you just type ALL, hit enter one more time, and it's now selected. And then you could just, you know, erase. Actually, you could have just typed erase, typed ALL, enter, enter. So now you've taken everything out, but you still got, you know, all of, like there's their viewport, but now it's no longer showing the geometry because the geometry get erased. Okay, so now we've got that done, and we're going to need to put in a couple of things that are going to be useful that we use a lot of, and that's going to be some title blocks, sheets.
Hey, Ken, can
Maybe,
we have a quick
yes.
bathroom break?
Oh, yes, sir. Yes, sir. In fact, I was looking at my watch about 3 minutes ago, said we should do that now. And then I got sidetracked again on my soapbox. So let's do that. In fact, take about 10 minutes. We'll reconvene, say a quarter after. And I will stop the recording. If I can find out where it is. I'll pause the recording and off we go. Now, so we've got a couple of things that we had defined. We've got some layers defined, and understand that's going to probably evolve somewhat. I'm not sure I'm in 100% agreement with their choices, but anyway. And some line types, and we've set a couple of variables. We've established our scale that we want to use to start off with as our default scale is a 50 scale. And that's essentially it. Now we could have a bunch of blocks. We don't, I think, have. The only block we should have now is, yeah, see that SPT 9 and SRV PN01.
Yeah.
So, and those are from, see that plus mark, that's the actual, oh, excuse me. Oh, thank you. So sorry about that.
Mine's
The
actually
plus,
a cross instead of an X instead
yeah,
of a cross. Is that okay?
Right, and that was from putting that point in. That was the point symbol.
Right.
Because once that block got inserted into our drawing, its definition stays there until we purge it. Because even though we erase the point, the definition is still there. So, you know, so we'll have things like, you know, we're going to insert in a couple of things. We don't really need to predefine a bunch of blocks, but if it's things that Carlson does not supply, like if we have a specific north arrow that we want to use or a company logo or something like that, then we'll go ahead and insert it once and either leave it in place, or we can insert it and then erase it. And the definition is always there so that we can use it later. So we'll put those in as we need. But I guess the first thing that I really want to start setting up is the title block information at possibly, you know, more than one or at different scales. So we're going to do that over in our paper space world. And there's a couple of ways we can do that. We'll close this off. If I go over here to my layout tabs, I've got two that come up by default, just the way the CAD system comes up. I don't really need the second one, but I'll leave it there in case I need to do something else, because I can always, you know, I can copy this one, I can add new ones, I can do whatever I want. So right now, just whatever this uses as it comes up by default is whatever it is. So we're going to predefine a particular set. And I noticed on your standards, you have a, what, an 18 by 24?
18 by, I think it's weirder than that. I think it's 18 by
26. Well, 17 by 22 is a standard printing size. That's why I think it's 18 by 24 is a 9 by 12 as being in half. That's why a 17 by 22 is an 8.5 by 11 divided, doubled on each side. 8.5 twice is 17, 11 twice is 22. Well, anyway, I tell you what we'll do is I'll just go over and take a look at what it was. Final plat.
18 by 24.
Yeah, 18 by 24, which is really unfortunate. It should have been 17 by 22, but what the heck. And it's also, why they restrict you to such a small size, I don't know.
It used to be, it doesn't make sense anymore. It used to be that was the size that the county clerk recorded. And they had plat books that were that size, and so they had to be that size. But they don't even use that anymore. They put them in 24 by 36 translucent envelopes and don't even have them in plat books anymore. They have them in hanging file.
Yeah.
But you can't convince the planning commission to change the standards. I'm going to try this year to get them to change to 24 by 36.
Yeah, or at least, well, that's an architectural D size is 24 by 36. That's a full 2 feet by 3 feet. Whereas what we use a lot of are what they call the ANSI D sizes, which is 22 by 34 or whatever it is, so that when it divides down in half, it's 22 by 34. So that when you print that at, say, at exactly a half scale, exactly at 50%, it's a 17 by 22, or I'm sorry, 11 by 17. So 22 by 34. So it becomes exactly an 11 by 17, which is a standard piece of paper that you can buy at Staples, and you can print out of your printers and all that kind of stuff. So that's
a good idea.
So that's why now the architects always go for the extra, a little bit more, 24 by 36 instead of 22 by 34, because it's more important to their ego that they get as much room to draw stuff as possible. So anyway, I digest. But so anyway, that being said, so let's set this up. So we get an 18 by 24, and we get 1/2 inch borders around, except for the binding edge, which is a 1 3/4 inch border. Okay,
so they don't even bind them anymore.
All right, I know, and yet, in fact, when I had, let's see.
In fact, that drawing I sent you, I was able to go right to the plat book and copy that. So they have them digitally, as well as in the plat book, and nobody even goes in and looks at the plat books anymore.
Right. Oh, I know.
Member of the general public.
Yep. Yeah, but like for instance, on the one that I did for my project, notice I've got, and this is the full 22 by 34 with the smaller borders on the edges. And the reason it's a little bit larger down here on the bottom instead of which should be the same as the top right edge and the bottom, but is that I switched out of one piece of software into another, and it shifted it up, and I just now noticing that for the first time. So it shifted that. But anyway, I keep this edge little bigger because when I deliver these to the contractors or to whoever, they're physically printed pieces of paper, and they put a folded up piece of colored paper over here and staple the edges. So
Yeah.
that just gives them, truly that opportunity to make the binding. All right, so to do that, let's say we said what, half and then 1 3/4. So the first thing we need to do is we need to define this thing down here called layout as a paper space entity. So I'm going to give it a name. I'm going to right click and choose rename, and I'm going to call that 18 by 24 final plat. Okay. Let's call it final plat. Well, no, let's just call it final plat. Now, there's two schools of thought here, Michael. One is we can do all our work here in this particular layout space and then share layouts, which is what IntelliCAD is going to give us the freedom to do. If we had AutoCAD, we'd have to do it a slightly different way. We would go out into another drawing somewhere, and we would, call that drawing, 18 by 24 title block. And we would work on that and keep it going separate. And then when we were into this thing, trying to use it, we would insert that drawing into this one, treat it as a block. But we're going to just go ahead and define it here, because we can always copy this layout into another drawing, just like we did with those layers and line styles up here. We have layouts are now, see there? And I can drag and drop that into another drawing, and I've got my layouts copied from one to the other. So here in model space, where we normally do our work, that's where we set that up as being decimal units, and it represents feet to us on the ground.
Right.
But this is going to be a piece of paper, and this is going to be a different measurement system. But we're going to come down here now. After we've renamed it, we're going to right click and choose Page Setup Manager. Okay. And you can, if you see right now, by default, even though I've named this 18 by 24, by default, you see its print size is 8.5 by 11.
Yeah.
Well, that's part of what we're going to change now. So I can, if I choose add, I can give it a name here. And this is not the same as this 18 by 24 final plat. That's the name of this sheet of paper. But what this setup name would be, I might call it, B size Epson printer or whatever. It could be something that you want to name. It's not anything that you have to name at all. But if you do name them, they get saved, and then you can reapply them to other layout tabs over here. So that could be helpful. So I'm going to set here where it says named, I'm going to say add. And I'm just going to call it, instead of anything particular like that, I'm going to call it default setup. Dash 18x24. Okay. Meaning when I do that, see up here where this goes into a name. So then when I have maybe, 5, 6, 7 other different sheets down here, instead of having to redefine each one of those individually, I can just sit on those and then choose this, and it brings it all in. Okay. Now, for the printer, when you pull this down, do you have an Adobe PDF? Probably not, unless you have Adobe, unless you have
Microsoft PDF.
Yeah, that's not going to be sufficient because that Microsoft print to PDF does not allow you to define big paper sizes. So if you were going to do a particular PDF direct, you need a PDF driver. Let me see. You got a PhotoSmart, but it only defines up to an 11 by 17, I think.
I've got a DWG to PDF.
That's the one. Let's see, I'm going to use the same one, DWG to PDF. Okay. And the reason I had Adobe PDF is because I have installed in my system Acrobat, and not just Acrobat Reader, but I have the Acrobat Creator. So that's why that shows up. And these are just named Windows printers, except for these extras, DWFs and DWGs. So DWG to PDF, that's what we want. All right. Now, when we first chose that, notice it switched our paper size to 33.1 by 46.8. Well, that's not exactly what we want. So we're going to, first of all, take a look at the properties up here. So I'm going to choose that. 2 tabs, information and settings. The printer name is not available to us. I could type a description. That's basically all I can do here on this one. But I'll go to settings, and I've got some things I can set. Any of these things that are showing and that are grayed out are things that I can't change, but some of these I can. And I tell you that the defaults are almost always what you want to do. Lines of array. Yeah, this is all good. And then custom properties, if I choose custom properties, I select it up here at the top, and then I choose it down here at the bottom button, and they're not even giving me that. Okay, well. I guess there are no custom properties available with that particular driver. There are, let's say if I was using a defined printer like your Epson PhotoSmart or whatever, or Workforce, then you can set some custom properties. So apparently there aren't any for DWG to PDF, so that's fine. So none of that really turned out to be applicable. But because we were at it, it tells us that a configuration file has been modified. The configuration name, just leave it the same and say okay. All right, and so that's the properties of that printer. But now we're going to talk about the properties down here of the paper. So now instead of an ISO expanded A0, which equates to 33 by 46, we're going to pull this down and choose that 18 by 24, which is going to be an architectural C or expanded C. The expanded is going to relax and give us more margins if we want them. Don't necessarily need them. We could choose just architectural. But see, there's your ANSI C is your 17 by 22. That's more your standard printing sizes. But the architectural C is what we're going to want. Architectural C, 18 by 24, but let's use the expanded so it's got larger margins. And it doesn't really matter which one of these you choose because it's going to automatically rotate to its proper portrait or landscape down here in the right.
Mine is, okay, do it 24 by 18 instead of 18 by 24.
Correct, yeah, that's mine as well. And again, it doesn't much matter because it will rotate itself accordingly.
Okay.
All right, now, So we've told it the paper size to use, the print scale. And what do we do? Because if this over here to the right of that says what to print, either the full display of the model space or the extents of the model space, regardless of how you zoomed in, or a particular window that you click and click in model space, then you can change a particular scale here every time you plot. But we're going to plot the layout. That's this 18 by 24 final plat. And this is going to be what gets plotted, everything within this defined piece of paper. Therefore, this fit to paper no longer applies because it does fit to paper when you plot the layout. It's just automatically there. And a couple of things you can do here. You can set a particular scale so that it, you might define this as 18 by 24. So if you wanted to say plot these at half size, you could change the scale here. But since we're doing PDFs, we're going to generally do that at the operating system level, out in Windows when we go to print those PDFs. So we're not going to screw with that. What we do want to make sure we have, though, is that we're using a 1-to-1 correspondence. When I see that this is 24 units long and it's 18 units high, I want those to be my inches. So I want that one here, one in this computer, in this program, 1 unit, is going to be 1 unit defined in the resulting PDF file. Now that's not talking about the scale on the ground. The scale on the ground is controlled by this layout that is inside this piece of paper. So make sure that's 1-to-1, meaning that 1, in our case, inches equals 1 unit on this piece of paper, right?
Right.
And then you could have a particular offset for the origin to print. And this is where you could set this up for your X origin to be 1 3/4, but I like to leave these set at 0 and define those borders with drawn line work. So we'll do that. And then on the right-hand side, a couple things to set. We're going to come back and fix this as we evolve. But now I'm going to leave this print style table pen assignment set to none. And
more print styles in that drop-down menu than I have.
Probably, yeah, because see these 3, that's my Beaver Area School District. I've got 3 different ones defined for that. Well, I'll tell you what, let's use monochrome. Let's choose just regular monochrome.
Okay.
And then for now, I want you to only have this 3rd guy checked.
Okay.
And then this middle button checked, and we'll make it landscape as the middle of those 3.
Okay.
Now, the reason, and I'm leaving a couple of these things off from the way we're going to ultimately do them, just so you can see the effects of this later on. All right, so we want to say okay. And we'll say close, and you'll see the paper change. It shifted slightly. I don't know if you noticed that.
No, I didn't
And
see it.
okay, so if I type DIST for distance, I'm going to just sort of pick as close as I can to that corner down there in the bottom. You can't snap to it because it doesn't recognize that there's anything there. And I'll click up here at the top. Well, that still says 8.5. I click here and I'm going to go over here, and if that still says 11, yeah, see my distance? So I do need to go back and repair that. And I think I know what happened. So if I go back and right click my page setup manager, here's what happened. Remember the one I was defining was this one?
Yeah.
When
how did you get the page? Okay, never mind. I found it.
Yeah, you got it? All right, so when I had first come back and I chose to add and gave it a name,
yeah,
it still kept me here, which was that default 8.5 by 11. So what I need to do is choose this now and say set current. And now when I say close, you'll see it really change. There it is.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's better. Now if I do that distance again, I'm just going to get, close. See, that's 18. And there's your 24. So that's exactly 18 by 24. So now I know if I type a piece of text, if I wanted to just type a letter, type a title here, just use my text command. I may just type, start right here, and it wants to know my height of my text. Now here's where I would put in 0.1, and that does not mean 1/10 of a foot on the ground. That means it's 1/10 of a unit on this piece of paper, which is an inch. What they call it, test label. And so if I go and look at that, I think I'm going to retype it as all cases, or uppercase rather. So if I take a look at that and then do a measure that distance from here to here, I see down here that that's like 0.1 inches. It's exactly what I want. I select it, I look at its properties, and I see its height is 0.1. Okay, we'll talk about annotative text and stuff later as we need to. And that's one of the things that we probably would like to start getting into, so that when text is labeled over here and it's generated here to be 1/10 of a, to be 0.1 inches, then when we get here, if we plot that at a different scale, it can either blow the text up or shrink it down, or it will recreate the text to be that same 1/10 of a inch size. And we'll talk about that as we get things set up. Now, again, here's my viewport, and this is going to be the container that holds the amount of the model that gets shown into this piece of paper. These are like little windows you're cutting into that model space to be able to see your drawing underneath it. Okay. It can be repositioned. It's a thing on the screen. It could be moved around. Well, I guess it could if it would respond. So if I move it, say, from here up to here, then that's where it would work. So you get the sense that if I move, let's say maybe I shrunk it way down like this, but moved it up there, well, that'd be a good place to put my vicinity map, right?
Yeah.
And when I did that, then maybe over here, my model space, way over here, I've got my vicinity map drawn, but over here is where my subdivision is. So when I am here, I point this viewport to my vicinity map, and maybe another viewport over here, I point to my subdivision. But we'll get into those nuances here a little bit later as we go along. All right, so one thing I want to do is, let's see, if I select this viewport, I look over here on my properties, and I see that it's on layer 0. Well, I don't want it to be on layer 0. I want it to be on a layer called viewports, which doesn't exist yet, I don't think. So I'm going to click this little drawing manager, the IntelliCAD Explorer, rather, my layer manager. And I'm going to scroll this thing down, get into the V's, make sure I don't have any V ports or any V-V ports or anything like that, or V type. Okay, so I don't. So I'll tell you what I want to do is I'm going to start making a series of layers for my title block, and I'll just, you know how we had certain prefixes and such for these things. I'm going to now make a new layer, and I'm going to call it, first of all, V ports. Let's make that one first.
Wait a minute, let me catch up with you here. You hit the
this new button over here, right up at the upper left.
yeah. Okay. You're calling it V ports?
Yeah.
Okay.
And its color, I'm going to click there where it says white. I'm going to choose red, just so I see it standing out. Line type continuous is fine. It's going to be on, unlocked, thawed. Now it's line weight. Let's give that, say, a 0.30, so it shows up a little bit as long as we have our line thickness.
Where's the line weight? Oh, okay.
Yeah, keep going to the right, okay. And now I'm going to make sure, though, here's the key that I want to make sure is that
wait a minute, let me catch up.
Yeah,
you wanted
sorry.
That to be 0.18?
No, 0.30.
0.30. Okay.
And now I'm going to scroll over here, and the key thing that I want to do is right here in this column where it says print. I want to click that so that the little red X comes on. Now what that's going to let me do is it's going to show me where those borders are and let me work with them. But when I go to print the sheet, it's not going to print the actual frame.
Okay, so you're putting an X on that.
Correct. Okay. Correct. All right. So now I'm going to close that off, and I've got this one that I just drew, or that was already here rather, and it's sitting here. I'm going to go up here to its properties. I'm going to change its layer now, scroll all the way down and make it on layer V ports. And I'm going to make sure its color is set to by layer, which it is. Line type is by layer. Scale is 1. Line weight is by layer. Now the line weight didn't show up.
I'm not finding my V ports.
When you pull this layer name down, it should be all the way at the bottom.
Oh yeah,
okay.
Looking for it alphabetically.
Well, it is, but V dash comes before VP.
Yep.
All right.
Okay.
So now, remember,
what to do with it? You said to change the color.
No, I just verified that it is set to by layer. Everything is set to by layer. Another thing I want to make sure I do is once you're done with that, if you click off of it over here in the properties, we forgot to reset this. I'm going to change that line type from contour. I'm going to go all the way up to the top and make that by layer. Just that's what I want to keep as my default.
Okay,
now
mine is okay. I'm good.
Okay. Now
I never did move my square. Mine's still down at the bottom.
That's absolutely fine. In fact, I'm going to do maybe this, okay, just to show how this is going to work. So, but you see, it's red, but it's still very skinny looking, and that's because down here in the status bar at the bottom, there's this little thing that says toggle line weight on and off. So if I double click that,
and which one is that?
That's this one. If you don't see it, then you need to right click. Wait a minute, not right click. Where is it set?
What's the symbol look like?
This one right here looks like a plus mark with the upper and left.
Toggle line weight on and off. I got that.
Yes, okay. So double click that. Okay. And this one had a line weight of by layer. Okay, that's good. And it's 0.3. So I want it to, I might have to make it. Oh, I think I know. All right, so even though I've turned that on, I would have thought that would have made it show up, but it still didn't, and I think I know why. And that is if I go back to my tab name and right click and choose Page Setup Manager. And then choose Modify. Do I need to scale line weights? Let's see what happens there.
What did you click?
I clicked to scale line. Yeah, but I don't think that had the effect that I was looking for. So I'm going to go back and unclick it. And I tell you what I'm going to do is I'm just going to choose in my layers now. I'm going to go back to my viewports layer, which is all the way at the bottom. And I'm going to change it. Instead of 0.3, I'm going to choose 0.5. Well, seriously, come on, IntelliCAD. Try something here. Yeah, that's what I was afraid of. Okay. So this works slightly different than AutoCAD. So even though I have my viewports layer defined as this line weight, the fact that it is a viewport apparently does not allow me to change its line weight. Like even if I set it up to a full 1, so that should be huge. And yet I'm never seeing it. So, all right. Well, that's just a little fluke. I was hoping it would show up as, give us a nice bold view, but okay, I guess it won't. All right, that's fine. So now, again, this is going to be, and if I go over here into my model space, I'm going to click in my model space, and I'm going to just draw a bunch of random crap. Where's my, give me a circle, a couple of squares, rectangles, whatever. Okay, so I now got this in my model space. These are things that have been drawn in my drawing as far as the geometry of my drawing goes. If I look over here, there's nothing showing up. So let's double click inside that little window, that viewport. So that's as if this is my new little playground, my new little other computer where I'm looking at everything in that drawing. And I can issue a command like zoom extents, and there it is. So there's apparently something way down here too. Don't have any idea what it is. But I can then zoom this up to be a particular size. Okay. And that's, you know, I'm really basically setting the scale. And I can zoom, or I'm sorry, I can pan by pressing the wheel down on the mouse and pushing it around, so I can position this inside of this little window where I want it and let it up. When I'm happy with everything, I'm going to click outside. I'm going to double click outside that window. And now I have set that scale and position. Now, if I select that viewport and do something like change its size, you see what I've done is I basically just brought the edges in closer or bring them out further. All right. If I move this, I'm going to click in the middle button now and move it down to the lower right. See what it did?
Yeah.
I didn't actually move the stuff that was drawn. I just moved where I wanted to see this window, because this window is a view cut into that model. Okay, so that's going to be how we're going to do things like that little vicinity map in the upper corner versus the regular map over here, versus if you had something like, you see this, what is that up there? That's note 18. All right, here's a little inset for 1 inch equals 40 feet. Okay, and that is where is that? That's right here, right there. Yeah. Okay. So what I could do is I could have here is my, that's all my mapping. And I'm going to make another viewport. So I'm going to go to, where do I put it? That's the problem, is I typically just type that, but I want to see where it is under here. If I'm, should be a draw function. Well, for now, let's type viewport. I'll look it up and find out where Carlson has put it. So just type VPORT, hit enter. And let's just draw another viewport right here. If I select it, let's make sure I'm on, I change its layer to be on viewports just so that it doesn't plot, and I can see that it's a viewport by seeing that it's red. Now notice my circle has now become a stop sign. That's just a resolution issue. And that's another one of those variables that we want to set in our drawing file.
How did you verify that that's red? Mine's black.
Select it.
Yeah.
Go up to the layer in the properties and set it on viewports.
Okay.
Because it drew it on the current layer, which was if nothing is selected, I see I'm on layer 0. I haven't set that to be my current layer. Okay. Now, wait, say that again.
Not yet.
Okay.
You hit, where did you change that under?
I select the frame itself, the viewport. Yep. I go to my properties.
Yep.
I look under layer. It's all the way at the bottom.
Okay, that's what I thought. Mine isn't. Under by layer?
Pardon?
Oh, no.
No.
Okay, I got you.
Yeah.
I got you.
Yeah, there you go. Okay.
Yeah.
Now here's another variable I want to set that controls things like this circle turning into stop signs, which I can't stand. That's another AutoCAD poor programming issue. But that's called our view resolution. So while we're here, let's just type, bless you.
Thank you.
So while we're here, who the heck is calling me now? Hold on a second. It's Dave, I can't take him right now. Okay. So let's set this variable. So while down on the command line, I'm just going to type the word VEWRES for view resolution. I'm going to hit, yeah, then hit enter.
Oh, wait a minute. It said unable to recognize command.
Try it again. Press escape a couple times, then click down there and type VIEWRES. Okay. Hit enter. And do you want fast zoom? Do you want to say yes?
Yeah.
And now for the curved display quality range of 1 to 20,000, it's set by default to 100. Let's type 20,000. That 100 is a holdover from the early days when video memory cost so much money that nobody had them and they sit down low. So, you know, it's time for Autodesk to change all that, but they don't yet. But anyway, there's the case. Now, so that will be saved with this drawing once we're done. Now, we have two different viewports. And let's go back to the model tab for a minute. And I'm going to change a couple of things here just so you can see some of the effects. This will be green and let's make it. You don't have to worry about doing this part of it, but I do want to show you one other particular.
Yeah, I actually don't have anything drawn in my model space.
Okay, that's fine. Let me get a different line type of, and all right. All right, so we got a couple of things here, but let's say we have that little, we wanted that driveway blow up to be right in here. Okay, so we're gonna, you know, maybe right in here is where we're gonna indicate that we're gonna do a blow up over on our map sheet, okay? So I'm gonna go back to that piece of paper and there you can see my colors are showing up. And there's that little spot that's going to be my blown up area. And if I double click now inside of this second viewport and zoom this thing like way up here, So you see what I'm accomplishing is I don't have to redraw that geometry twice. See, I've got I'll double click outside of it. So I've got basically a viewport that's, and it can be exactly that shape. In fact, viewports don't have to be rectangles. Like they can be any shaped polyline that you might need. Okay. In fact, quite often we do that to step around insets and stuff in the title block. You're going to put little, you're going to draw a polyline as to that's what you want the thing to look like. All right, so now I've got that as my blow up, and I can then pick this up and position it, you know, anywhere I want. Like here, I'm right over top of this one, or it could be off to the side, or you can even straddle it. Okay, so one is just a view. Each one is a view into the drawing. And I could say from here, maybe, I could do something like, let's see, let's change that. It's obviously going behind us. Let's do it more like that. Okay. And then oops, it would be from here. All right, so you get the idea. Now, in the old days, this used to be where I would have to take that stuff, copy it, put it over here and blow it up and do everything I needed to do with it. Now I've got these things to cut in. Now, if I look at this in, do I have the choice here? No, I don't. If I look at this, if I want to do a preview of this, here's my print preview. Oh, good Lord. All right, just for now. Good God. You know, you can't do anything with this. Change that to architectural C, which is 18 by 24 landscape. Now let's look at, okay, so here's, this is what that would look like. Here's my main stuff. I've got this little frame over here blowing itself up to this inset frame. Now notice how these don't go to the corners. That's because I've got them going to those red corners, and this black line is actually, uh-oh, I said the wrong one. So that black line is actually drawn. That's that black line that's there. So I would need to probably, you know, zoom that all the way up to the corner to make that match. Now, where did it go? All right, I'm in this model space. I want to be in this model space. I'll have to find out how to do that. I've got this one sticking inside of that one, and I'm not sure. What I have to do. Well, anyway, I'll figure that out. But we would normally like, now I can jump inside of that one. And then I would bring that up like so, or even better, would drag these corners up to meet. And then I would move, where's my move from here to now here. Okay, so then to a couple of things I still don't care for. In this version, there it is. So now you see those corners are pointing up here to the actual frame, which is this frame just repositioned and blown up. And you know, I don't have to draw these 3 lines. At all. In fact, this can be just simply, you know, off to a corner somewhere, like it is here. It's over here. Yeah. Okay. So that's sort of the gist behind how these things work. Don't sweat the particulars right now, but notice that over here, see, that's rather thick. Let's make this one weight. Okay. This one is half. Let's make this one a 1. And weight. By the way, when you see a polyline properties, one of the properties on the polyline happens to be thickness. You see this one right here? Yeah. That, it's an unfortunately named property. It's not the thickness, it's not its width on the ground. That's actually one of 2 different things. That's either its line weight, which is relatively new, and that's governed by your setting here, and whether or not you display the line weights with this down here in the lower right hand corner, clicking that little toggle. Another place for the width of a polyline is down here in these global widths or start and end segment widths. And those are the actual ground distance units, and that always gets displayed regardless of whether you're looking at your line weight on or off over here. The line weight up here is the thickness of the pen tip when you draw it. The width down here, if it is non-zero, that's how wide on the ground it's going to color that thing in for you. Okay. Now there's this one thing called thickness, which unfortunately is called that because it makes us think of the width of the line, how thick the line is. But that thickness is its thickness vertically. Okay, not to be confused with down here, this thing called elevation. That's where wherever this line is picked up and placed in the air or on the ground or below it. Okay, but it's still just one-dimensional thick. But if I give it a thickness, I can see if I can show that to you here. I don't know how it displays. So if I give it a thickness of 5, that's just that one. Now when I zoom this thing around like that, let me turn this off. Yeah, there you go. So let's give that a thickness of 50. Ah, there we go, perfect. So now you see how that's showing it is having a vertical thickness.
Yeah.
And whereas if I gave it a different elevation, let's say 50, all it does is it picks it up and moves it to its particular spot. Now, that being said, we don't use thickness ever. Really, it's just not anything that anybody in our industry has ever bothered to use. I don't know. I'm sure there's some other uses for the CAD world that might apply in. Okay, but I just wanted you to be aware of what it was. Let me get rid of that extra thing.
Okay.
I just wanted you to be aware of what it is, so that when you see that in the properties, you're not confused by it or think that that's the width of the line. That's line weight is the thickness of the pin tip. Thickness is the vertical thickness from the bottom to the top of the line, the polyline. And the width down here is the actual ground distance width between the left and right edges of that line. So it could have a width of a certain, from here over to here, and the edges will be drawn with this line weight, and over here another edge is drawn with that line weight. Right, let's just do that to show you. We'll make a thickness, say 25. There we go. And we're going to type there we go. Perfect. Okay. So now my line weight is how thick the pen is on the ground. So if I turn that, toggle that on and off, you see that's just the ink. The thickness is still 0. That was its vertical height. And now the width is how wide this is from this edge to this edge. If I do a distance, say from here to, oops. I do a distance of, say, from here to here. That's my 25 feet. Okay, so that's a physical thing, and it's as you zoom in closer, it gets bigger. You zoom out, it gets smaller. If I and notice that my line weight up here says 1 millimeter. That's the thickness of the pen tip. As I zoom in closer, notice it stays constant. It's as if I draw it at this scale, that's how much ink goes on the paper. If I draw it at this scale, that's how thick the ink is when I draw it on the paper, or how wide across. Okay, so you sort of get the distinction on all those different things. And it doesn't much matter other than, if you need something to be an exact width, like when I draw sewer lines and I want to represent a 24-inch HDPE pipe, I will make its width 2 feet, so that's how big that is on the ground. I know how big that pipe's going to be. Okay, But if I'm just drawing something rather schematically, you know, I may control that with my line weight. So normally by default, they're 0, and there they are showing here. All right, so that's a little business there. And now you can see inside here, see how that's heavier than that, and that's heavier than that.
Yeah.
That is based on the fact that this has a line weight of 0.5 millimeter. This has one of 1 millimeter, and that's 2 millimeters. Okay, so if I were to actually plot this on that 18 by 24 inch sheet of paper, that would be 2 millimeters, 1 millimeter, and 0.5 millimeter. If you toggle the display line weight, you see how that turns it on and off?
Yeah.
That would apply over here as well as it does just in general display. Okay. So generally we want this if we want to control by line weight. Now, notice how nice and pleasantly thick that is. Here's what we're going to get into a little bit later. I'm going to just give you a bit of an introduction to it. I'm going to control most of it for you. You just need to let me know when and where something works or doesn't work and we need to change something.
Okay.
But that is controlled by, remember we talked about these color tables?
Yeah.
When we first got set up? Well, that was this, see this monochrome table. Well, right now you're not seeing things in monochrome because we did not say right here to display the print styles. If I do that, let's display the print styles instead. And I'll say okay, and I'll say close. Now, the print styles, because my monochrome definitions are set to plot with black. And notice the line weight went away, even though down here, I'm still showing to plot my line weights. I'll go back to the page setup manager where I can hit modify, and I could go over to my pin table assignments and I can change some of that stuff, or I can say down here, instead of printing with print styles and line weights, I want to print my entity line weights, but yet still use styles and color by definition. And so I've done that. I can't get it to. That's still, yeah, it's a 2 millimeter. Well, it should have kept, it should, excuse me, it should have kept the line weight, but changed its color back. So I don't know, maybe they don't have that one working right. Let's try this. If I go to page setup manager, modify, I display print styles, I'll turn that off and close. Now they're back. I will repeat, modify. This time I will display the styles, but I'm only going to, oh, you know what? I bet that only happens at print time. Display print styles. Okay. So, but anyway, so what's happening with that is, yeah, that's only at print time. All right, so I'm going to print here. But right now I can either display the print styles or not. Now the print styles are defined up here, in my choice of tables. And if I click this button over here, here's how a color table, in other words, this monochrome.ctb, it's a color table, how that controls what you see out here. So for now, when it finds something that is drawn in color 1, 2, 3, all the way down through color 255, it's going to draw with these characteristics over here. Okay, so let's say that long dash, that ziggy kind of, oh, sorry, if that's as loud to you as it is to me, I really apologize. Anyway, that zigzaggy line across the middle was a magenta color, which I think was this color 6. So if I sit here on this color 6 and I tell it to make it black, in fact, if I look at all, and you can do multiples at one time, but if I want to make that, instead of black, that's the one color I want to say, let's make it red, okay? And let's change its line type to be, say, dashed. And let's give it a line weight of, let's call it 2 millimeters. All right. We'll call it that. So now, doesn't look very dashed, but that's what, so that's what it is to be based on a color, is that anything it finds to show in this view, whether it's inside a viewport or whether I've drawn it out here as text or whatever, if it is of a specific color and I want that color to behave differently here than it does, say, here, then all I have to do is make it a different, or, I define that in my color table. So I'm going to put that back now to my monochrome, and I'm going to edit that table. I'll find that color, and I'm going to make it black, and I can make it either solid or whatever the entity is. That's usually what we do, is use entity or object characteristics. So anything that's magenta, plot like this. Okay. Now, I think the initial default setup is with like everything set to plot black. But I like to do this. I like to start with, say, color 250 and go to 255. And instead of using those, let's see, no, I would go to 250 and make it 250. Yeah, so it's going to be, well, that would be the object color. Yeah. All right, and Mike, you don't have to be doing all this. I'm show you the net effect of this. So I will make that to use the object color.
Yeah, I kept trying to keep up about 20 minutes ago.
Yeah, all right. So, well, again, that's part of what I want you to get some benefit out of this relationship too, is that I can do a lot of this stuff offline. I just want you to see it so you know where it's coming from. And you'll know that something that might need to be changed. You may have to, come back and say, well, where do I do that? How do I do that? Then that would be fine. All right, so now we've defined that, and I'm going to make one particular color. Let's go up here, and I'm going to say, I'm going to take this color 240, and I'm going to say, I'm going to make it to be blue. I'll make it half screened, and um, 1 millimeter. All right. So so now I've reset this back. That's now the magenta is set to be the object's line weight. Blue color is not, green color is not. They're set to be that, whatever that was defined globally. So I've got two viewports out here on the screen. In fact, let me just open this up a little bit bigger so you can see the difference in how this will work. So if I've got over here a drawing where I've got my major platting going on, I've got my property line is heavy and a certain line style, but then over in this little drawing off to the side, that might be you know, that's something I'm emphasizing something else, like maybe the easement or something over there, and I don't want that property line to be standing out so prominent. I may want to make it a different color or a different line weight or line style or what have you. So what you do is that when you're inside of this viewport and I select this guy, I see that it has, by normal definition, a color of magenta and a line weight of 1 millimeter. Okay. Same thing. If I'm over here, that guy has the same thing, magenta of 1 millimeter. But what I can also do is, while you are in a given viewport, well, it's black, but anyway, on our layer manager, we now have that, instead of the global definition of that one being magenta. Oh, shoot. Sorry, Mike. I've got to fix something here. What layer is that on? It's on layer 0, of course. All right. So let's change that. We're going to change that layer. Let's just put it on GNO note. Okay. So now GNO note is actually going to be this cyan color, so it doesn't matter. And yet in its viewport configuration, it's going to stay the same. It could be cyan. It'll be that blackish looking thing. Okay. Let me also change this to be color is by layer. So it's actually cyan, and its line weight will be by layer. So globally, it's going to be cyan, and let's call it double dash, whatever that is. By layer, line type is by layer. Oh. Okay, and here, let me see, page setup manager. Let's, there we go. All right. So while here, I'm taking that layer that has that cyan, and that is this this jaggy line here, and it's of this line type, and it's of that line weight. Now, if I do nothing to it over here, I keep it the same, then that's fine. But watch what happens up here. I'm in a different viewport. Now, if I go here and come over to my viewport settings, let's change the color for that viewport to be 254 and its line weight to be, let's use, or line style rather, not weight. Where's my dash? Let's say this dash 2. And its line weight to be just a 0.2. I think this needs to be something that we can radically see the difference. All right, so here is a case where this is the exact same line. Okay, it's magenta, it's those, it's that pattern. But over here, it keeps that pattern, but it plots it in black, keeps its own line weight. And yet in this viewport, it has a completely different color, line weight, and pattern. Okay, so I don't have to draw things twice, make one of them one way and one of them the other way and blow it up a different size. That's the very same thing. And in fact, if this should happen to change slightly, notice it changes right up there. Same thing here. If I just draw across there, off it goes, right? So I think you understand the concept here. Yeah. And the fact that I've got different viewports that control the visibility of, in fact, I can even say within this viewport, if I were to say, well, you know what, I wanted to see my meets and bounds here. I don't want to see them over there. So I just go here and don't freeze it here. That's your global level. It turns it off for everything, but go all the way over to the viewport freeze and thaw, freeze it there. And now, what did I just do? Let's try this again. Nope, it'll be in here. That's this guy, VP. Well, let's see. If I freeze it here, so now it's frozen in that one, but not in this one. Why can't it show me that? Where? It's exactly what I did before, and it just, I don't know, there's something goofy with the video. I'm guessing because I'm sharing across a Zoom session, I don't know. But in any case, you get the idea. And then, so these are individual views into our model, and we can change what and how they're displayed. We can also, once they're set, and they're set to a specific scale. Now, we just sort of eyeball zoom downs, but we're going to actually set a standard scale over here to be one of our standard survey type scales. And once we have that in position where we need to go, then we can lock that display so that we can't, even if we're in it, we try to zoom and pan, it's going to zoom and pan the whole sheet. Whereas if we don't have it locked and we do that zoom and pan while we're in it, it's going to do exactly what we did the first time to get things set up. Display locked, yes. Okay, so it's just a little convenient switch, because I guarantee you, and I still do it to this day, sometimes you forget that you've got it locked or unlocked, and you'll accidentally roll the wheel and you'll change your zoom level, and you'll think you're doing everything at 60 scale, but you're really doing it at 63.25 scale. So just something to be aware of, okay? So now, being 4:45, let me hand it over to you for any questions that you might have had occurred to you. I will continue working on this between now and our next session, and I'll give you updates when, in fact, I'll send you an update a couple of days ahead of time so that you can see it when we get into it. Do you have, or do you want me to use, well, let's see, this is a title block. It's basically got this lower square. That's all that's there.
Let me look at some other plats that we've drawn, and let me see
okay.
if I can find a better example than that.
Yeah, because if you look at, say, mine, like mine, I always have a revision block, my company logo, and if I've got a colleague on here, like when I have a surveyor that works with me. Now, this is one that I like to have all my notes on the end page, but I've got some clients that I have set up that all that note goes across the bottom line, across the bottom of the sheet instead of the edge of the sheet.
Well, I'm thinking that it's probably time for me to do something more standard, like you have there, the way I have.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm saying. Just find one you want to model from, and we'll set it up. And if you've got a company logo, or just send me any or everything that you'd like me to sort of start building into your sheets, and including, I don't know if you have your stamp and or signature as a scanned image or anything like that. But if not, then we'll get that done. Okay.
Yeah, and I don't think I had, the only question that I have is probably one that you can't answer, is how long do you think it'll be before I can actually draw a survey plat?
Oh, I'm hoping by the end of next session you'll be able to, because we're going to have things, we'll have all this stuff set in play.
Oh, okay.
And then because then really, and the whole point behind that is so all of this stuff gets taken care of, and then you can work over here and you can do things like all of your annotation, and you can set in your you know, draw your legend, draw your north arrow, draw a grid. I noticed that's part of your requirements, although that map that I saw there didn't have it. You know, this map here.
No, it's got a grid tick. It's got a couple of them.
Oh, I see. It's just
got
the
one
ticks.
up
It's,
there. You just have to put a couple of grid ticks somewhere so that the mapper
right here.
can fit it into
Right
the GIS map.
I
It's
got
got
you.
another
Okay.
one somewhere else.
Yeah, there's one right here, and then there's one right here.
Yeah.
Okay. So they're not, it's not a regular, it's just a couple of ticks.
Yeah.
I see. All right. Well, then that's probably, I was gonna say there's a command if you do, see this draw grid? Now that'll draw the whole grid, and it's every, we see what it does down at the bottom of the screen. It says plots a grid at a user specified distance and optional labels, northern, eastern. So that can draw the full grid lines or just ticks at the intersections, but it draws all of them. But it's you know, it'll still just do the two commands, or I'm sorry, the 2 points that you might want to show, or if you want to show 4 or what have you, then it's, you know, but that's what you need to start learning, where these commands are, so you can start putting this stuff together. And
Right.
that's going to be done mostly over here in the model space. And then when you pop over here, it's going to sort of magically show itself up, and then you can start inserting notes and stuff. And I noticed from here, you know, you had certain notes that are required, and they're required to, well, not that, but, you know, they're required to read a certain, so, wow. Final plat somewhere. Scripted lines. Oh, here it is, like a notation that states all of this. You know, so I'll make all of those things up and start putting them in a block library that'll be in part of this template, so that then when you go to, if you need a seller's note, you don't type all that crap again. You don't have to go track down the drawing to find it again. You just insert it from this drawing.
Right.
Okay. All right. So that's what I want to give you. I want to basically put all the arrows in your quiver that you're going to need so you can get these drawn.
Okay, good.
All right. And as you get this stuff worked through, as you're putting these things together, and particularly if you get in any kind of a time crunch, let me know, and I can, you know, I can whip one together for you so that you can get it out the door. But then also the end goal is to teach you how to do it.
Right.
So that you can stand on your own. All righty.
Okay, very good.
All right, sir. Well, hey, go enjoy the rest of the day. We're still having lovely weather up here. It'd be nice, I think, if we actually got some rain, but it's not too hot. It's been a weird summer because we're usually baked by now, and it's so hot and humid, and the humidity's been really low this summer. So I'm not complaining. So anyway, enjoy that, and we will talk to you soon.
See you next Thursday.
All right, sir. Take care, and I'll send you a link when the videos are finished processing. All righty.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
All right, you bet. Let me turn that off and.